Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So now let's talk about the classification of the internal combustion engines. So IC engines, as you know, you have hundreds and thousands of applications of IC engines. And for every small application, such as, for example, you must have seen remote control RC planes you guys must be making. Sometimes they use battery operated motors. Sometimes they use internal combustion engines. So the internal combustion engines that are used for RC planes can be as small as 1 cc or 2 cc swept volume. And there are applications such as ships, or for example, you must have seen oil tankers which carry the oil from one continent to another continent. They are as big as a football field, and they have engines which are as high as almost faculty building. And their pistons are 1 meter diameter, okay. Their strokes are like 4 meter, the height of this room, okay. So, and they run very slowly. So IC engines are basically catering to a large number of applications in our everyday life, from very small applications to very large applications, lawn mowers, vehicles, cars, scooters, okay. So let us see the classifications. First is based on the method of ignition. So if you are using spark to ignite a mixture, okay, then it is called spark ignition engine. And this particular engine which was ignited by spark was invented by Nicholas Otto. That's why it is called Otto cycle engine, okay. It works on the Otto cycle and uses gasoline or petrol as fuel, or CNG can also be used as fuel, okay. If you look at the compression ignition engines were invented by Rudolf Diesel, okay, and that's why they are called diesel engine. Diesel is basically, we call them diesel engine in the honor of Rudolf Diesel, who invented this engine, right. So here you have a fuel injector, and when the piston comes very close to the top dead center, you inject the fuel and then the combustion takes place, okay. Similarly, based on the design, I think we have already discussed, it can be either reciprocating engine like this one, or it can be rotary Wankel engine like this one, which I already explained to you, okay. Now if you look at the reciprocating engines, there could be many types. For example, if all the cylinders are in one line, that's called inline. If all the cylinders configuration are like V, then it's called V. There could be X configuration. There are many configurations. Opposed piston, opposed cylinder, all kinds of application, designs are there. Third is based on the working cycle. So there could be a 2-stroke cycle, there could be a 4-stroke cycle. What does it mean? 4-stroke cycle means the engine cycle is completed in 2 rotations of the crankshaft. That means this crankshaft, if it takes 2 rotations and 1 power stroke is generated, then it is called 4-stroke cycle. In this case, it is a 2-stroke cycle. It means in 1 rotation of the crankshaft you will have 1 power stroke. That's called 2-stroke cycle, okay. So 2-stroke engines are crankcase scavenged, okay, and they could be supercharged, they could be turbocharged, okay. They could be naturally aspirated. That means naturally aspirated means the air is inducted from the atmosphere without getting pressurized. They could be supercharged. Charged means you are putting more pressure, okay. If you are doing supercharging means if you are having a compression device which is connected to your engine crankshaft, then it is called supercharging. That means you are drawing some power output from the engine crankshaft and then pressurizing the air. That's called supercharging. But if you are smart, you would not like to waste your power in charging. So what you do is you put a small turbine, and exhaust gases are hot and they are at a higher pressure than atmosphere. So you allow those gases to pass through turbine. So then what will happen? Turbine will start rotating because the gases are hot, they are high pressure, and use that energy to run a compressor. So the compressor will then compress the air and and that compressed air can then be put to the intake. That's called turbocharging, because you are using a turbine. Okay. You can also have different types of combustion chamber designs. For example, you can have open chamber or you can have divided chamber. Open chamber, divided chamber, what does it mean? If you look at this combustion chamber and there is only one chamber, then it is called open chamber. But if you decide that, okay, I am not going to inject here directly in this main chamber, I will make another small chamber and I will inject the fuel here, then this combustion chamber is this and this. So the combustion chamber is divided into two parts. One is the main chamber, the other one is auxiliary chamber or pre-combustion chamber. So this is called divided chamber. Okay. So most of the indirect injection engine, this is the indirect injection engine, because you are not directly injecting the fuel in the main combustion chamber, you are injecting the fuel in the pre-combustion chamber where the combustion starts. Combustion takes place here and then flames come into the main combustion chamber and combustion gets completed in the main combustion chamber. So combustion is initiated here but completed here. So this is one design which is called divided chamber. Most of the engines that we use today are open chambers. These divided chamber engines are now only for used only for academic purposes, because the beauty why they were used was because, you know, here the turbulence is very high, they could use poor quality fuel. Okay, so that's why they were popular till 1980s or 1990s. But then they are not able to meet the emission regulations, so they are banned. So most of the engines do not use this technology now because they are not able to comply with the existing emission regulations. Okay, so actually emission regulations are dictating a lot of technology in the engines. Then if you look at the cooling, you know, the engine could be water cooled, engine could be air cooled. If you look at the water cooled engines, most of the engines which use coolant are water cooled, and if you look at the bike engines, there is no water, these are all air cooled engines. So air is used for cooling the surfaces. Most of the air cooled engines have fins so that the heat transfer is enhanced and you can still cool the cylinder without the help of liquid. So based on the valves and port designs, you can have many designs. For example, overhead valves, underhead valves, rotary valves, cross scavenge porting, loop scavenge porting, thorough or uniflow scavenge. There are many designs, but you see many of these designs were, designs are being invented ever since 1890. Okay, there are hundreds and thousands of designs. But then designing something is one thing and being able to sell that in the market is another. So if you are not able to sell those designs, die their natural death. So many of these things have died their own natural death, and most of the engines now use overhead valves. Okay. Then we can classify the engines based on fuel. You could have gasoline fueled engines, you could have diesel fueled engines, natural gas, LPG, you could use methanol or ethanol, you could use hydrogen, you can have dual fueling. Dual fueling means you use one fuel and when you run out of that fuel, you switch to another fuel. You could classify the engines based on the method of load control. So you could basically use the throttling of the fuel and air flow together. For example, if you look at the carbureted engines, there is an accelerator. So what that accelerator does, it opens a valve. So that basically controls the quantity of the fuel air mixture that is going in. So you are basically throttling the fuel air mixture together. Okay, so you could control the fuel or control of the fuel flow alone. For example, in diesel engines, if you look at diesel engines and when you press the accelerator, what has changed? So basically it is going to change it is connected to the fuel pump, and there you are controlling only the fuel quantity. So the air that is coming into the engine remains same, but you are only controlling the fuel quantity. That's why this is called quantity governing and this is called quality governing, or you could use combination of these two. Coming to the two-stroke engine, how does it work? So as I said, there are two strokes. One is the compression stroke, the other one is power stroke. Okay, let's see how this works. So for example, This is the valve, reed valve. Reed valve is a one-way valve. That means it will allow the fuel air mixture to come in, but when this pressure rises, it will not allow anything to go out. When the vacuum is there, it will allow the fuel air mixture to come in, but when the pressure increases, it will close. Okay? So here you have carbureted system, etc. So carburetor, the air flows through carburetor and then you generate fuel air mixture, it comes in here, and this is something which is called transfer port. Okay? So in the exhaust blow down phase, the piston moves down. Okay? And when the piston moves down, the exhaust port first get uncovered. So when the exhaust ports get uncovered, here the pressure is high, so exhaust will go out. Okay? Piston is coming down, so here the pressure will be higher. So when the piston goes down further, this port will get uncovered. So then what will happen? This air fuel mixture will go up. Why it will go up? Because there is a deflector here. That is why the piston shape is peculiar. So it goes up, and when it goes up, it pushes the exhaust gases away, out. This is called scavenging. Process of pushing the burnt charge with fresh charge is called scavenging. So it's not one of the best ways, because there is no way you can completely separate the exhaust gas from the fresh charge, and therefore some of the fresh charge also goes out, and that is why two-stroke engines are now almost extinct to some extent. Okay, they are coming back, but they are extinct because lot of fuel goes out without burning in the process of scavenging. So then this whole thing gets filled with the fresh charge, and then the piston starts moving up. So when it starts moving up, this covers this one, and this also covers this one. So now this whole thing is filled with only the fresh charge. You are compressing. When you reach close to the top dead center, you apply the spark, combustion takes place, and then your piston is pushed down. So when you are going up, what is happening? Here the pressure will reduce. So here the vacuum will be created, and this valve will open. So when the piston is going up, you actually are taking in fuel air mixture, and that fuel air mixture will be used in the next cycle. Okay, you can see this here very clearly. So this is the filter. Okay, fuel filter or fuel. This is basically the carburetor. Okay, and there is a fuel filter as well. And so air is coming here, and this is the throttle which is connected to your accelerator, and you are controlling the quantity. Okay, and this is coming in this. There is a reed valve here. Okay, so this fills this, and this is the transfer port. This is the intake port, this is the transfer port, and this is the exhaust port. Now you look at this process. Okay, so now you see I am at the top dead center. So combustion has taken place, exhaust hot gases are there. I am pushing it down. Okay, look, this is still covered, but this is about to be uncovered. I move here, then what will happen? Exhaust will go out. Okay, this is still covered. So most of the exhaust gas will be pushed out because of the shear pressure. Okay, and then I come here. Here the pressure is increasing because I am pushing this part. So the gases will come here, and through this port it will try to form a loop and scavenge it. Okay, and then this is done, and then this gets covered first. Then till this time the scavenging is happening, and this gets covered. Okay, and then I move up, compression, and here I am uncovering this. So vacuum is already created. As soon as I uncover this, this gets filled. So either you have a reed valve or you have this kind of a mechanism, it's up to you. And then I apply the spark. So this is how a two-stroke cycle works. Okay, particularly the spark ignition engine. So one power stroke is completed in one revolution of the crankshaft. Okay, this is the beauty, and that's why its specific power output of a two-stroke engine is high. Specific power output means power output per kilowatt of the engine weight. So it's higher from two-stroke compared to four-stroke. Piston motion controls the opening and closing of the valves, and ports control the exhaust and inlet flow while the piston is close to the bottom dead center. So you see all the ports opening and closing is happening when you are close to the BDC. So this is how two-stroke works. Two-stroke, they are applicable to SI and CI engine. They have high power to weight ratio. They are simple valve design. There is nothing which is moving. It's a very simple design. Valves, there is no valve. So there is no maintenance. If there is a valve, there is more maintenance, because the more moving parts you have in the engine, more maintenance you will have. That's why two-stroke engines are very simple, maintenance free. Okay, you don't have to really service them that frequently. So there are two strokes. One is the compression stroke. It compresses the cylinder content and draws the fresh charge into the crankcase. So fresh charge is coming in. Here the compression is taking place, and then you initiate the combustion near the TDC by applying a spark. In the power stroke, you have exhaust ports and intake ports are uncovered sequentially, and induction of the fresh charge compressed in the crankcase. Okay, so this is clear. Now this is a two-stroke diesel engine. The only difference is that instead of a spark plug, you have a fuel injector. Okay, so and this is a divided chamber, by the way. So this is pre-chamber and this is the main chamber. So this is a two-stroke diesel engine. Okay, now let's come to the four-stroke engine. Four-stroke engine, as the name indicates, there are four strokes. What are the four strokes? First stroke is intake, where you take in the air. Second stroke, air or air fuel mixture. If it is a diesel engine, then it is just the air. If it is petrol engine, then it is air plus fuel, gasoline. Okay. Second is compression. So in the intake stroke, exhaust valve remains closed, intake valve is open, your piston is going down, so entire swept volume is filled with fresh charge. In the compression stroke, you close both the valves, piston starts moving up, and when you are moving up, what will happen? This is very close to isentropic compression. Not really isentropic compression, there will be some heat losses, but you try to achieve as close to isentropic compression as possible. So by the time you reach top dead center, you have very high temperature and pressure. Okay, depending on what compression ratio, you can have up to 250, 300 degree centigrade temperature, 30, 40 bar pressure very easily. Okay, and then if it is a spark ignition engine, you have fuel air mixture, you apply the spark. If it is a compression ignition engine, you inject the fuel, and then combustion takes place and expansion of the hot gases take place, and the piston is pushed down, right? So this is called expansion stroke. Both the valves are still closed, right? In the exhaust stroke, you open the exhaust valve and then piston starts moving up. So first, as soon as you open the valve, because of shear pressure, a lot of exhaust gas goes out. The remaining gas, which is at atmospheric pressure, you push out using the movement of the piston, right? So this is the four stroke, and then you come back to the first one. Okay, so this is the four stroke. So majority of the reciprocating engines are based on four strokes. It is intake stroke, compression, power, and exhaust stroke. One power stroke completed in one revolution of the crankshaft, and this is also applicable to both SI and CI engines. All right. So, so in the intake stroke, this starts at piston TDC, ends at BDC, and fresh mixture. It could be just mixture of fuel and air, or just the air. It is drawn in. In the compression stroke, both valves are closed. Mixture is compressed to a small fraction to the initial volume, and pressure and temperature increases. In the power stroke, high temperature, high pressure gases push the piston down and force the crankshaft to actually rotate. In the exhaust stroke, remaining burnt gases exit the cylinder. So I will show you this four stroke engine. I have a four stroke engine here, and I will show you all the four strokes. So this is a diesel engine, you can see, and so you see the movement of valve here. Right. So this is the exhaust stroke, and now I am coming. This is the compression stroke. This is the intake. Intake valve is open. My piston is going down. It is sucking the fuel. Just the air in. This is the compression stroke. Both the valves are closed, and I am increasing the pressure and temperature. And then I have the power stroke, because the combustion takes place. Fuel is injected in the end of the compression stroke, and expansion takes place. And then finally you have the exhaust valve open, and exhaust goes out through this exhaust. Okay, this is the fuel injector here, and this is the fuel pump okay, and this is the rack which controls how much quantity of fuel you are going to inject. So this controls basically how much power you want. So more demand you put, more fuel you will be putting in every cycle. Okay. So this is a typical example of 4-stroke engine, and in the rear side if you look, this is the rocker arm, this is the push rod, and here you have the cams inside. Okay. You can have a leisurely look later on also. So if you look at the spark ignition engine, air fuel mixture enters the cylinder. This is ignited through a spark plug. Fuel can be injected by two ways. One is you can have carbureted fuel injection. That means you can carbureted fuel induction. That means you have a carburetor. Carburetor is a device which prepares the fuel air mixture as per the requirement of the engine. The other thing you can do is you can use fuel injectors. Now when you use fuel injectors, you can do two things. You can inject normally the fuel in the port, intake port. You don't inject the fuel directly. So when you inject the fuel in the port, the fuel will mix there, and when the valves open, fuel air mixture will go in. This is called port fuel injection. And this technology, multi-point port fuel injection technology, or MPFI, is one of the most popular technology for the SI engines. In fact, if you look at the car market, maybe about 95% of the cars in the world use this technology. Now there is a more advanced technology which is called gasoline direct injection. That means now the fuel is directly injected in the cylinder. You are not injecting in the port. Okay. It requires a lot of sophisticated controls and things like that, and that's why it took a lot of time to develop this technology. In India, I think there are only 1 or 2 manufacturers which are trying to develop this. Ford has some vehicle on GDI technology. Okay. So fuel air mixture, fuel can be either injected in the port or can be mixed using a carburetor, or it can now also be directly injected. Generally these engines have lower compression ratio and the fuel used is gasoline. So here you can see in this figure, in the previous figure, this is port fuel injection. So the fuel is injected right before the intake valve. So this is a PFI engine, and then you can see in the center there is a spark plug, and you can see this 4 strokes happening here. So this is a 4-stroke port fuel injection spark ignition engine. Similarly, if you look at this, this is a 4-stroke CI engine. Intake, compression, injection, combustion, and exhaust. So all 4 processes are shown here. The difference in the SI and CI engine is that in CI engine you are inducting only air. In SI engine you are injecting both fuel and air. Fuel is injected directly just before the combustion process. Fuel is auto ignited at high pressure and temperature, and diesel fuel injection system therefore will contain a fuel injection pump, fuel pump basically, this one, and high pressure lines and a fuel injector and some controls. And you see, diesel is a fuel which is not very volatile. Okay, if you want to burn, you have to basically spray it, atomize it into small droplets, otherwise in milliseconds you can't burn it, right. So you need some nozzles to spray it at high pressure. How high pressure? Generally diesel engines have very high pressure. How high pressure? It could be minimum 200 bar going all the way to 2000 bar now, commercial engines with 2000 bar. Do you have any idea of what is bar looks like? What is the pressure in the tire of a car? 32 bar. No, that's not correct. It's only 32 psi, which is 2 bar. What is the pressure of the tire of your bicycle? 5 bar. That's correct. So pressure in the tire of a bike is much higher than the pressure in the tire of a car. And now you are talking about fuel injection as 200 to 2000 bar. So you can imagine what kind of pressure it will be. And this fuel is compressed to that pressure, and then it passes through nozzles which are very, very small holes. Nozzles of the size of 50 micron. Do you have any idea what is 50 micron? Just take your hair. That's about 50 to 100 micron. So that kind of a hole, it is passed at such a high pressure, and that's when the spray disintegrates into atomized form. So then before the combustion takes place, this diesel has to evaporate, because combustion cannot take place in liquid form. So it has to evaporate, mix with the air, and then the combustion takes place, and it has to happen in few milliseconds. So it has to be very fast. So it has its own challenges, we'll discuss about it later. But generally the compression ratio is high because you want to have high enough pressure and temperature where when you inject, without the need of any external ignition device, the fuel itself should burn. So that is why the compression ratio has to be as high as 12 to 24, and generally the fuel used is diesel fuel. So this is just one charging device. When you do force induction or charging, I told you that there are two types of chargers. Here you have a pulley. This is connected to your crankshafts, and then this is the compressor. So that means this is driven by the power generated by the engine. So it will rob the engine of some power will go to run this. So this will reduce the power output, and this is a gas turbine. This is the compressor side, this is the turbine side. Exhaust goes in, rotates the turbine, the power produced is used only to run this compressor. So you are not actually robbing the engine of any extra power, and you can still increase the pressure. So this is called boosting or charging. So when you say boosting or boosted engine, you must have heard this term very frequently. Boosting, what does it mean? Boosting means when you are trying to increase the pressure beyond the atmospheric pressure, that's called boosting. So suppose I have atmospheric pressure is 1 bar, and I am putting the engine at, I am supplying the engine with air at 1.5 bar. So how much I am boosting? So then the boosting is not 1.5 bar, boosting is 0.5 bar. So whatever pressure you are supplying minus the atmospheric pressure, that's called boosting. How much boosting can you do? So normally in passenger cars you keep boosting limited from 0.1 bar to maximum 1.2 bar. For very heavy boosted engines, such as for locomotives or for trucks, you can maximum go up to 2 bar, but that's also very difficult to handle. Okay, so the induction pressure maximum generally is not more than 3 bar in any case. Okay, so naturally aspirated engine, air is inducted, atmospheric air is inducted at atmospheric pressure. Turbocharged engine, intake air compressed by exhaust driven turbine compressor combination, and supercharged engine which have mechanically driven compressors. Turbocharging and supercharging, why do we do? Very simple. You want higher power. Suppose I have a small engine of 500 cc giving me 5 kilowatt, and I want to say that okay, I want to drive 7 kilowatt out of it. How do I drive? So I put in more amount of fuel and more amount of air, right? It will give me more power. Of course, I have to make sure that all my components are designed to deliver. They should not fail. Piston should not crack. After ensuring all that, you can do the boosting. Okay, so I can increase the power output from the same engine. I can increase the volumetric efficiency. Obviously, what is volumetric efficiency? The definition of volumetric efficiency is amount of actual air taken it at normal temperature and pressure divided by the swept volume. The air contained in the swept volume. So theoretically, whatever is the swept volume, that much air should come in, right? But actually it does not, because your intake opening, closing, etc. is very, very fast. So you cannot really, you don't have enough time for pressures to stabilize. That's why volumetric efficiency of a typical naturally aspirated engine is limited to 80-85%. But when you boost it, you are actually forcing more amount of air. So naturally the volumetric efficiency is going to increase. You have to put in more fuel, and when you put more amount of air and more amount of fuel, what will happen? Higher power output, and therefore, higher pressure and therefore higher power output of the engine. So the engine which is giving you less power, once you boost it, it will give you more power output. That's the reason. And the other advantage of boosting is that even a smaller engine can deliver you more power. So you can have lightweight engines, smaller engines which are lightweight. So this is normally necessarily used in large engines. None of the large engines of megawatt size or ship engines or locomotive engines is without a boosting. They are always boosted. because this reduces the engine size and this reduces weight for a given power output. So there are many parameters which can be used for determining how well your engine is doing or how is its performance. Okay, and these parameters are, for example, engine power output, how much is the power coming out of the engine, or what is the efficiency. All of us are interested in finding out what is the efficiency of the engine. Then BMEP, brake mean effective pressure, very important parameter. BMEP actually tells what is the load on the engine, okay, and what is the torque output. Torque output gives us a feeling of power. If your engine is able to generate more torque, that means more low speed torque means you get a feeling of acceleration and you have a feeling of power. Then specific power output, okay, then volumetric efficiency, and fuel air ratio is another parameter. Specific fuel consumption, brake specific fuel consumption, indicated fuel specific fuel consumption, these are some of the parameters. Thermal efficiency and heat balance. Heat balance is very important. Heat balance, as the name indicates, heat balance means balance sheet. You are putting some energy, where all that energy is going, how much is going for producing useful power, how much is going in the exhaust, how much is going in coolant, how much is going in friction and unaccounted losses and all that. Then emissions are extremely important. So emission parameters, exhaust smoke, opacity, and emissions of different species, pollutant species is also very important. And finally, the specific weight of the engine is also very important. You see, many of these parameters are important, but there are few parameters which are important for specific applications. For example, if you are looking at an aircraft engine, okay, so aircraft engine, one of the natural requirement will be that the weight of the engine should be very, very low. You want to have more power output from the same engine so that you don't have to fly that, because when the aircraft fly, the engine also flies, and if the engine is heavy, you will not be able to carry passengers in it, right? So the specific weight becomes extremely critical, more important than other parameters. Similarly, if it is an industrial engine and you are generating power, for example, if you put a engine for IIT Kanpur power production, 8 megawatt, what is more important, weight or fuel economy? So in that case, specific fuel consumption becomes extremely important, more important than aircraft engine. In the aircraft engine, specific weight is more important than specific fuel consumption. So depending on the application, the importance of the parameters, individual parameter actually changes. For example, if you are looking at racing cars, okay, racing car, specific power output is extremely important. How much power you can extract from per liter swept volume of the engine, right? So that specific power becomes extremely important. So as I said, relative importance of these parameters will depend on what application do you have for your particular engine, okay. So if you look at power, now power is several types. One is the fuel power. What is fuel power? Fuel power is nothing but the amount of fuel that you are putting in, how much energy can it generate, how much power it can generate. So the total power generated by the combustion of fuel is what is fuel power, okay. In other words, if I have to define the fuel power, okay, I can say fuel power, how it is defined? This is MF into QLHV. What is MF? MF is the mass of the fuel that I am putting in. Suppose you want fuel power per minute or per second or per stroke, you can define that way. So depending on that, the definition of MF will change, okay. QLHV is the lower heating value of the fuel, okay. So this is how you define the fuel power. Indicated power, now you have this fuel and this fuel is burning, okay, in the engine. So as I said, fuel air mixture burns in the combustion chamber. It produces high pressure and high temperature conditions which push the piston. So what is your first interface where the power is transferred to the engine? It is the piston. So whatever is the power available at the piston is called indicated power. And then through the crank slider mechanism, it is transferred to the crankshaft and finally it comes out to the at the shaft end. Do you think this power available at the piston and this power available at the shaft are the same? They are not the same. Why they are not the same? Because this power that is available, it has to overcome the friction in the cylinder. There are many bearings and there are many unaccounted losses that are happening, and finally the power that is available to you at the shaft end is called brake power. So indicated power is the whole power produced by the combustion of fuel, cannot be utilized to drive the piston, and because there are losses to the exhaust, to the coolant, to the radiation, and the remaining power obtained at the piston is called indicated power. Okay, so out of the total fuel power, only a small fraction goes, only a reasonably, a reasonable fraction goes to the piston, and that power is called indicated power. And from there, even smaller fraction is available to you at the shaft end. That's called brake power. The power developed by the engine at the output shaft is called brake power. And the difference between these two is going where? In the friction. So the difference of these two is called frictional power. So frictional power of the total power developed by the engine, some power is consumed in overcoming the friction between the moving parts, friction in the bearings. Okay? So it is the difference basically between the indicated power and brake power. Okay? So is the difference clear? Fuel power, indicated power, brake power and friction power. Is this clear? Second, extremely important parameter is efficiency. Now this efficiency, when we say efficiency, we are talking about thermal efficiency. The general definition of efficiency, we represent general expression of efficiency is represented by neta, and for any process, general, how do we define? First is what we want divided by what we pay for. This is general definition of efficiency, and if I want to apply it to engines, okay, so there are two efficiency parameters here. One is called indicated thermal efficiency. So the definition of indicated thermal efficiency in this case will be what we want. We want more indicated power. So this will be indicated power divided by what we pay for is the fuel power. So if I have to write the expression for or indicated thermal efficiency, this definition will be indicated power divided by fuel power, and this I can write as indicated power divided by mass of fuel into Q LHV, right? This is my expression for indicated thermal efficiency. Similarly, if I want to define my brake thermal efficiency, I can define this as brake power divided by fuel power, and this is brake power divided by MF into QLHV, right? Can you tell me which power is higher, indicated power or brake power? So obviously the indicated power is higher, and therefore the indicated efficiency is also higher than brake thermal efficiency. Indicated thermal efficiency is higher than brake thermal efficiency. Okay? The next parameter is mechanical efficiency. What is mechanical efficiency? So mechanical efficiency is nothing but the ratio of these two, ratio of brake power divided by indicated power, because you see how we define it. Mechanical efficiency means efficiency of your powertrain. How much power you are putting in the piston and how much power you are getting at the shaft end. So what we want in this case, definition of efficiency, brake power is what we want, and what we are putting in, indicated power. So the definition of mechanical efficiency will be will be brake power divided by indicated power. Okay? So, this is just a normal way how we define our mechanical efficiency. Specific power output. So, specific power output, it is the brake power output per unit piston displacement. Output of the engine can be increased by increasing either the speed or BMEP. Specific power output is basically the brake power output per unit displacement. How do you measure displacement? In liters, 1 liter engine, 2 liter engine. So, basically how much power your engine is producing per liter swept volume. That is what is specific power output. So, if you want to have higher power output, what you can do? You can either increase the speed of the engine or you increase the BMEP, the pressure, brake mean effective pressure. I will define the brake mean effective pressure in a little while. Then the next thing is volumetric efficiency. What is volumetric efficiency? It is an indication of breathability or breathing ability of the engine. What is breathing ability? I have 1 liter lungs. Can I fill it 1 liter? No, it will be less than that. Okay. So, how much less it is? Can I take 950 ml in? If I can take 950 ml air in, then it is 95% efficiency. Similarly, in the engine, as I said in the last class, you cannot fill the entire swept volume with air at room temperature and pressure because of the sheer speed. It is, you are never able to fill. Okay, the processes are so fast. So, the definition of volumetric efficiency is actual amount of air taken in at normal temperature and pressure divided by the air taken in at normal temperature and pressure by the swept volume, or the maximum air that you can take in practically. So, this is how it is defined, volumetric efficiency. Okay. So, if I have to define the volumetric efficiency, volumetric efficiency is defined as mass of charge actually taken in divided by mass of charge represented by cylinder volume at intake temperature and pressure. So, either you actually figure out what is the mass divided by the mass taken in at intake temperature pressure, or you convert both into standard temperature and pressure, number will remain same, okay, because the difference the coefficient will cancel each other. So, this can also be written as actual mass taken in divided by the mass taken in by displacement volume, okay, and this can be written as density of air into volume flow rate actual divided by density of air into volume flow rate of the displacement volume, right. Mass is density into volume and this will cancel out as I said. So, actually the volumetric efficiency is defined as volume flow rate of the actual divided by volume flow rate of the displacement, or you can say volume of the air for a certain amount of time taken in divided by the same displacement volume in that amount of time in that many number of cycles. Basically this rate thing has been removed, okay. So, this is a simple definition of volumetric efficiency. Typical volumetric efficiency of a engine is 85%. If any higher than 85%, you have designed a pretty good engine. Okay. Also, please note that here this is mass of charge actually taken in. Okay. So, mass of charge, that means in a spark ignition engine, particularly carbureted one or port fuel injection one, you are taking in mixture of fuel and air. So, you have to put that mass. So, fuel is a part of that. Okay. But if it is diesel engine, then it is, there is no charge. This will then become only the air. Okay. So, next definition is fuel air ratio or air fuel ratio. So, this is very simple. If it is fuel air ratio, so basically mass of the fuel consumed divided by mass of the air consumed in a certain amount of time. You can also say rate of mass fuel consumption divided by rate of air consumption. If it is fuel air fuel ratio, it is just the reverse of it. So, the composition of mixture is measured in terms of fuel air ratio or air fuel ratio. Okay. And you know, fuel combustion basically require at least the stoichiometric air for complete combustion, at least. So, stoichiometric combustion means that you are putting in chemically correct amount of air for unit amount of fuel that you are putting in. So, stoichiometric air fuel ratio is a mixture ratio that contains just the right amount of air to support complete combustion of all the fuel, and there is no oxygen going out in the exhaust. That is also a condition. Otherwise, it will be, if the oxygen is going out and then in the exhaust, then it is excess air. Okay. So, typically for hydrocarbon fuels, which petrol and diesel both are, the stoichiometric air fuel ratio is somewhere between 14.5 to 15. Why it is this range? Because the petrol and diesel, if you buy from one bunk and compared to another bunk, there may be slight difference in hydrogen to carbon ratio from one lot to another lot, one petrol pump to another petrol pump, one company to another company. There may be slight variation. So, when you do the calculation, there is a slight range. Okay. So, to be on the safe side, we take 15, but sometimes it is 14.5 is enough. Okay. There is another parameter called equivalence ratio. So, this is equivalence ratio is nothing but ratio of actual fuel air ratio to stoichiometric fuel air ratio. Okay. What does it mean? It is a very, very important parameter. Equivalence ratio is actually represented by a parameter called phi, and this says fuel to air ratio actual divided by fuel to air ratio stoichiometric, right. That is what it says. So, what does it mean? It means that if value of phi is 1, that means the air fuel ratio that you are putting in is stoichiometric, it is chemically correct. If you are having a lean mixture, okay, a lean mixture means what? Fuel to air ratio will be less than this. So, that means phi will be less than 1. If phi is less than 1, that means you are dealing with leaner mixtures than stoichiometric. If the value of phi is more than 1, that means you are dealing with rich fuel mixtures. Okay. There is another parameter called relative air fuel ratio. Relative air fuel ratio, this is represented by lambda, and this is also very frequently used. This is nothing but inverse of phi, equivalence ratio, and this is defined as air to fuel ratio actual divided by air to fuel ratio stoichiometric. That means if lambda is 1, it is a stoichiometric mixture. If lambda is more than 1, then it is lean mixture, and if lambda is less than 1, that means you are dealing with rich mixture, and both of these parameters are very frequently used for research purposes. In fact, lambda is used more than equivalence ratio. Relative air fuel ratio is used more compared to equivalence ratio. Okay. So, this is also an extremely important parameter. Okay. Similarly, I told you that I will be discussing with you the mean effective pressure. What is this mean effective pressure? See, if you look at an engine, you have injected the fuel, okay, and the pressure, the piston is at top dead center, the pressure starts rising, okay, because of combustion, and then piston starts moving down. So combustion, at some point in time the combustion gets completed, but the pressure is still very high, the piston is moving down. So what happens to pressure? Pressure will go down because now the volume is expanding. So pressure in the cylinder during the power stroke is not stationary. This is changing all the time. When it is TDC, the pressure is high, pressure goes further up when you move, but then it starts going down. Okay? So this pressure is not constant. But when you want to compare, you have to define a parameter called mean effective pressure. Mean effective pressure is nothing but that imaginary pressure which remains uniform throughout the entire power stroke and generates the same power as the actual cycle. So that's why it is called mean, that means average, effective pressure. So that means effectively it is the same as actual cycle, right? So if you are producing more power, that means the pressure will be high in the cylinder. So mean effective pressure has to be higher. If you are producing lower power, you are putting less amount of fuel, mean effective pressure will be relatively lower. Okay? So it's that hypothetical or average pressure, its value does not change. So in real life it does not have any meaning, it's just a parameter which is defined. In real life the pressure varies, but it's just that average hypothetical average pressure which is assumed to be acting on the piston throughout the power stroke and gives you the same power output. Now this is mean effective pressure. This again can be put into two parts: brake mean effective pressure and indicated mean effective pressure. Again relating with indicated power of the engine and brake power of the engine. So brake mean effective pressure defined as BMEP, extremely important parameter used for all calculations in the engine. This is that average pressure based on brake power. Okay? Indicated mean effective pressure is that average pressure based on indicated power, right? So what does it mean? Which pressure will be higher? IMEP will be higher or BMEP will be higher? IMEP will be higher because BMEP something is going, and then another parameter has been defined which is frictional mean power, which is nothing but IMEP minus BMEP. It tells you how bad is your powertrain. If the FMEP is very high, that means you are wasting a lot of energy in friction inside the engine powertrain. Inside the transferring the power all the way from piston to the shaft, you are wasting a lot of energy. So FMEP has to be small. Okay?